9.16 seconds. That's all it took to wipe out 40 years of grind. 143 million people watched it live. And when it was done, a whole career was straight up buried. But only half the people on that stage caught the heat. There's a woman who sold over 100 million records, who flipped pop music into social protest, who showed a whole generation of black women that control ain't handed to you. You take it. But in 2004, the world decided she had gone too far. And the same industry that built her turned around and tore her down. Radio stations quit playing her music overnight. Award shows canceled invites. Record labels ditched her. She was erased in real time. Not because her art fell off, but because a man next to her did something wild and then vanished while she got crucified alone. But that public takedown was just the last chapter of a whole life running from control. Because way before the Super Bowl, way before the fame, there was a girl growing up under the belt of a father who didn't raise kids. He manufactured performers. How do you survive a childhood where messing up meant violence? What happens when you're trained to obey and never feel? And why, when she finally grabbed her freedom at 20, did the world wait 14 years just to snatch it back? Before we get the fall, we gotta go back to the start. To a house in Gary, Indiana, where the Jackson name meant opportunity, but childhood meant sacrifice. Janet Demita Jo Jackson was born on May 16, 1966 in Gary, Indiana, the youngest of 10 kids in a house that had already turned into a machine. By the time she took her first breath, her brothers, Jackie, Tito, Jermaine, Marlon, and Michael were already the Jackson 5, rehearsing in the living room, performing in rough, dingy clubs, chasing a dream that belonged to one man, Joseph Walter Jackson. Joe Jackson didn't raise children. He built performers. The family home on Jackson Street wasn't some safe space. It was basically a boot camp where mistakes got met with belts, where tears meant weakness, and where childhood was a luxury no Jackson could afford. While other kids in Gary played outside, the Jackson kids rehearsed 5 hours, 6 hours, sometimes till midnight. Joe would sit in a chair, belt in hand, watching every move, every note, every facial expression. Again, he'd snap, and they'd start over. If one messed up, everybody paid. Janet was too young to perform with her brothers, but she was never too young to watch. From her crib, then from the corner of the rehearsal room, she saw how the Jackson machine worked. Perfection wasn't a goal. It was survival. And failure wasn't just disappointing. It was dangerous. By 1969, the Jackson 5 had signed with Motown and the family moved to Los Angeles. The house got bigger, the cars got nicer, but Joe's belt never went anywhere. Janet was just 3 when her brothers became global superstars, their faces on lunchboxes and magazine covers. She didn't get fame yet, but she understood absence. Her brothers were always gone, on tour, in studios, on TV. And when they came back, they were tired, quiet, sometimes bruised. Her mother, Catherine, was gentle but powerless. A devoted Jehovah's Witness, she offered prayers and soft words, but she couldn't or wouldn't stop Joe. Years later, Janet said, "My mother was loving, but she didn't protect us. She couldn't." Janet's childhood disappeared before she even realized it. By age 7, she was performing in the family's Las Vegas variety show, singing and dancing with her brothers. Nobody asked if she wanted it. It was just expected. The Jackson kids didn't get their own dreams. They inherited Joe's. At home, Joe ran everything cold and strict. Conversations were orders. Affection was rare. Praise didn't exist. "He never told me he loved me," Janet admitted decades later. Not once. What he did tell her was to lose weight, smile bigger, move faster, be better, always better, never enough. School wasn't an escape either. Janet went to private schools where her last name came before her. Classmates saw her as Michael's little sister, not Janet. Teachers treated her different, sometimes impressed, sometimes suspicious. She had no real friends. Real friendships need time, trust, freedom. Janet had none. The Jackson house ran on silence and secrets. Joe's affairs were whispered about, never confronted. His violence was endured, never talked about. Janet learned early that survival meant staying quiet, smiling for cameras, and burying everything real under performance. While Michael rose to solo superstardom in the late 1970s, becoming the biggest entertainer alive, Janet stayed in the background, a kid surrounded by legends. invisible even in her own family. At dinners, everything revolved around Michael's tours, albums, numbers. Janet sat there quiet, watching, learning the unspoken rule. You matter only if you're selling. By 10, she was working. By 11, on television. By 12, helping support the family. Childhood wasn't delayed. It was deleted. No sleepovers. No first crushes whispered to friends. No lazy Saturdays. Just work, rehearsal, performance, and the constant fear of disappointing Joe. Janet later said she spent most of her childhood scared, not of strangers or the dark, but of her own father. I was terrified of him, she said. We all were. That fear didn't spark rebellion. It built obedience. Perfect, silent, suffocating obedience. The world saw the Jacksons as royalty, blessed with talent and fame. But inside, Janet was learning something else. Control wasn't love. Performance wasn't identity. And the spotlight they chased cast the darkest shadows on the ones stuck in it. She wasn't raised to dream. She was raised to execute. Not to feel, but to perform. Not to speak, but to obey. As she hit her teenage years, that obedience carried her onto TV screens across America. Not as Janet Jackson the artist, but Janet Jackson the product. The girl who smiled on cue, danced when told, and buried her real self so deep even she couldn't find it. The machine her father built had claimed another Jackson, and it would take decades of pain, rebellion, and crazy courage for Janet to finally break free. But that freedom would come with a price the world still hasn't fully faced. In 1977, at just 11, Janet got cast on Good Times, one of the biggest black sitcoms on TV. She played Penny Gordon Woods, an abused child adopted by the Evans family. The role made her cry on cue, show pain and vulnerability. For a girl who spent her life faking happiness while hiding fear, the irony was brutal. America saw a gifted child actress. Behind the scenes, Janet was just doing what she was told. She didn't pick the role. Joe did. She didn't negotiate the contract. Joe did. Her money went straight into family accounts she couldn't touch. Acting wasn't her dream. It was her job. The show lasted 2 seasons, and when it ended in 1979, she was thrown into the next role. No break. No time to just be a 13-year-old. She moved from Good Times to Different Strokes in 1980, playing Charlene Dupree, Willis Jackson's girlfriend. Again, the sweet, obedient girl, always smiling, always likable, always easy to control. For 4 years, she showed up on Different Strokes, then moved to fame in 1984, playing Cleo Hewitt, a student at a performing arts school. That role felt closer to her real life than anything before, a young woman trying to figure herself out through performance. But even that was controlled. She was still saying someone else's lines, wearing someone else's clothes, living someone else's vision. During this time, Joe decided Janet should also drop music. Not because she wanted to, but because the Jackson name made money. In 1982, at 16, Janet released her first album, Janet Jackson. She didn't write the songs. She didn't pick the producers. She showed up, sang whatever they told her to sing, and smiled for the cameras. The album went nowhere. Critics straight up dismissed it as generic. The public barely even noticed. But Joe didn't see failure. Nah, he saw a product that just needed better packaging. 2 years later, in 1984, he dropped her second album, Dream Street. Once again, Janet had zero creative control. And once again, the album flopped. She later admitted, "I didn't even want to be a singer at first. That was pushed on me. But in the Jackson family, what you wanted didn't matter at all. You performed, you obeyed, and you made money. Period." Behind the scenes, Janet's personal life was just as controlled. In 1984, at 18 years old, she secretly married James DeBarge, a singer from the rhythm and blues group DeBarge. The marriage was impulsive. It came from a desperate need to escape her father's grip. For a short moment, Janet thought marriage might give her freedom. It didn't. The marriage was a total mess. James struggled with addiction. The relationship was intense, chaotic, and didn't last long. Within months, Joe and Catherine got the marriage annulled. Janet was back home, back under Joe's control, her small attempt at independence crushed before it could even breathe. Years later, rumors started flying that Janet had secretly given birth to a child during this marriage. A daughter, allegedly hidden and raised by DeBarge's family. Janet has always denied it, but the whispers never really went away. True or not, the rumors showed something deeper. Janet's whole life was surrounded by speculation, control, and stories she never even got to write. By 1985, Janet Jackson was 19 years old. She had been working professionally for 12 years. She had appeared on 3 TV shows, released 2 albums, and gone through a failed marriage. Yet she had never made one real decision about her own life. She was like a puppet, and everybody else was pulling the strings. But something was changing. Slowly, quietly, deep inside, under all that obedience, a new thought started growing. Dangerous, exciting, and scary at the same time. What if I could be in control? That question, which started as a tiny whisper, was about to turn into a loud roar. And when it did, Janet Jackson would stop being a product and become a whole revolution. In 1985, Janet Jackson made the scariest decision of her life. She fired her father. There was no big dramatic fight. No screaming, no doors slamming. Janet just called Joe and told him he was no longer managing her career. For a girl raised to obey without question, trained to fear his voice, and conditioned to think survival meant submission, this was huge. This was rebellion. Joe was furious. Catherine was heartbroken. Her brothers were shocked. The entire Jackson family system, built on Joe's absolute authority, started shaking. But for the first time in 19 years, Janet chose herself. And she didn't do it alone. Janet had met 2 producers from Minneapolis who saw something in her nobody else had noticed. Potential beyond the Jackson name. Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, former members of the time, were young, hungry, and not interested in making Janet sound like anyone else, especially not Michael. When Janet told them she wanted to make an album about independence, about breaking free, they didn't just listen. They believed her. "We saw someone ready to explode," Jimmy Jam later said. She just needed permission. In late 1985, Janet flew to Minneapolis and walked into Flight Time Studios. For the first time ever, she was in a studio where her opinion actually mattered. Jimmy and Terry asked her things no producer had ever asked before. "What do you want to say? What do you feel? What's your story?" At first, Janet had no idea how to answer. She had spent her whole life performing other people's dreams. Finding her own voice felt weird, like learning a whole new language. But slowly, with patience and support, the words started coming out. She talked about growing up controlled, about wanting to make her own choices, about the deep hunger to be seen as Janet, not just Michael's sister or Joe's daughter. Those conversations turned into songs. And those songs became Control. The title track was a statement. "This time I'm going to do it my way." The lyrics were simple, but for Janet, they were powerful. Tracks like Nasty called out street harassment with confidence. "What Have You Done For Me" lately demanded respect. The Pleasure Principle celebrated independence and self-worth. Every song broke another bar of the cage she had been trapped in. Every lyric was a truth she was never allowed to speak before. Recording the album was exciting, but also scary. There were times Janet called Catherine crying, asking if she was messing up. "What if it fails? What if I'm not good enough without Daddy?" Catherine, even though her heart was breaking over the family situation, told her gently, "You have to try, Janet. You have to see." When Control dropped in February 1986, the music industry didn't know what to expect. Janet's earlier albums had flopped. Critics thought this would be another forgettable side project from the Jackson family. Radio stations were unsure. Then the first single hit, "What Have You Done For Me," lately climbed the charts crazy fast. The video showed a Janet nobody had seen before. Confident, strong, boss energy. She wasn't just cute anymore. She was powerful. Then came Nasty. Then When I Think of You, which hit #1. Then Control. Then Let's Wait a While. 5 top 5 singles from one album. Control sold over 5 million copies in the United States and eventually reached 10 million worldwide. Janet Jackson, once dismissed as Michael's little sister, became a superstar on her own terms. But the numbers were only part of the story. What made Control a cultural earthquake was the message. For young women, especially young black women, Janet became a symbol. She wasn't waiting for anyone to save her. She was saving herself. At 19, she had been trapped, voiceless, and controlled. At 20, she was free. The change was obvious. In interviews, Janet sat taller. She looked people in the eye. She spoke clearly instead of nervously giggling. The girl who once couldn't even choose her own clothes was now choosing everything. Her sound, her image, her message. The 1987 Control World Tour was her victory moment. Night after night, she performed in sold-out arenas, dancing with insane precision and singing with strength she didn't even know she had. Fans screamed not just for the music, but for what it stood for: freedom, power, identity. Critics who ignored her before now called her a visionary. Awards kept coming, but the biggest win was simple. She proved to herself that she could live without Joe, that her talent was real, that her voice mattered. Joe, of course, never apologized. He never admitted his control almost broke her. Instead, he told the media he was proud of Janet, like he planned it all. Janet didn't argue. She just stopped letting him into her life. But freedom had a price. Breaking away from Joe meant distance from the whole family. Her brothers supported her, but they were careful. Going against Joe could affect them too. Catherine loved her daughter, but struggled to go fully against her husband. Janet was powerful, but also lonely. Still, she proved something nobody could take away. Control wasn't just an album. It was her right. And once she tasted freedom, there was no way she was going back. The girl who was raised to obey became the woman who gave orders. And the world was only starting to see what Janet Jackson could do when nobody else was holding the strings. 3 years after Control, Janet Jackson could have played it safe. She had success. She escaped her father's shadow. She could have made Control Part 2, made easy money, and relaxed. Instead, in September 1989, she released Rhythm Nation 1814 and changed the entire game of pop music. This album wasn't about love or just personal power. It was about America's problems: racism, poverty, homelessness, illiteracy, drug addiction, violence. Janet, at 23 years old, decided to use the biggest platform in music to straight up force the nation to face what it always tried to ignore. "We're a nation with an unspoken truth," she sang. And then she said it loud, no filter. The album's concept was bold, almost wild, like she really didn't care what anybody thought. Side A talked about social issues. Side B went deep into personal relationships. The whole project was set up like a manifesto, with spoken word parts about prejudice and unity. Radio programmers were doubtful. Too political, they said. Too heavy for pop. Janet didn't give a damn. She had fired Joe. She had taken control of her music. Now she was taking control of the story too. Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, her ride-or-die collaborators, created soundscapes that felt urgent, military precise, music, and seriously powerful. The production was sharp, layered, futuristic. The beats hit like statements, like she was making it clear what time it was. The title track, Rhythm Nation, turned into an anthem. The music video showed Janet in all-black military gear, leading dancers in a warehouse with choreography so sharp it looked like combat. No glitter, no cute smiles, no soft vibes, just raw power. Pure, fearless, and impossible to ignore. The message was simple and real. Entertainment could teach. Pop stars could protest. And a young black woman from Gary, Indiana could lead armies, not with weapons, but with souls ready for change. The album blew up. Miss You Much hit #1, then Rhythm Nation, then Escapade, then All Right, then Come Back to Me, then Black Cat, then Love Will Never Do Without You. 7 top 5 singles, 4 of them #1. Rhythm Nation 1814 sold over 8 million copies in the United States alone, later passing 14 million worldwide. Janet became the first artist ever to get 7 top 5 hits from one album. Not Michael, not Madonna, not Prince, Janet. But the awards weren't even the main thing. The cultural impact was bigger. Janet wasn't just selling music. She was changing how people thought. Schools played Rhythm Nation in assemblies. Teachers used the lyrics to talk about social justice. Young activists rocked the black military outfits as symbols of resistance. For Black America especially, Janet became more than a pop star. She was a voice that refused to stay quiet. She stood on stages and spoke about police brutality, unfair education, and systemic racism, stuff most entertainers avoided to protect their mainstream fame. Janet risked all that for truth. The 1990 Rhythm Nation World Tour was next level. Janet owned the stage with more than 30 dancers, doing choreography that needed serious stamina and discipline. Every show felt like more than a concert. It was a movement, both literally and symbolically. Critics called her the most important artist of her generation. MTV gave her the Video Vanguard Award. Rolling Stone put her on the cover. She won Grammys, American Music Awards, Billboard honors. At 24, Janet Jackson was on top of the world. But Michael's shadow was still there. In 1989, Michael released Bad and went on a huge world tour. The comparisons never stopped. Who sold more? Who danced better? Who was the real king of pop? Janet hated that. "We're family," she told interviewers. "We support each other." But deep down it hurt. No matter how much she achieved, she was still Michael's music sister in headlines. Michael supported her, even calling to congratulate her. But things were complicated. They loved each other, but the industry turned their careers into a competition they never asked for. Family dinners got awkward. Conversations were careful. The Jacksons had always been business first, family second. Still, Janet's power was undeniable. By 1991, she was one of the best-selling artists, music, ever. Her influence reached fashion, dance, and culture. When she spoke, people listened. When she moved, the world followed. She went from controlled to controller, from overlooked to unstoppable. Music, from Michael's little sister to Janet Jackson, icon, activist, and the blueprint for a new kind of pop star. Music, but power brings jealousy. Success brings hate. And control, as Janet would soon learn, can slip away fast. The higher you rise, the harder the fall. And her fall was coming. Not because she lost talent. Not because she lost her voice. But because the world, especially an industry run by men scared of strong black women, was waiting for the perfect music moment to bring her down. That moment came on a football field in 2004. And when it happened, the woman who spent her life breaking free found herself trapped again. This time by forces way bigger than her father ever was. After taking over the world with Rhythm Nation, Janet shocked everyone. In 1993, she dropped Janet, an album that ditched the uniforms and serious themes to show something more personal, her sexuality. The cover showed Janet topless, hands covering her chest. The photo was taken by her boyfriend at the time, Rene Alzando Jr. The music was slower, smoother, more sensual. Songs, music, like That's the Way Love Goes and Anytime, Any Place weren't about fighting systems. They were about desire, pleasure, and the real Janet behind the icon. Critics called it brave. Fans loved it. The album sold over 6 million copies and had big hits. But what nobody knew was that the emotion wasn't just for show. It was real. Janet wasn't only singing about love. She was living it, secretly. Music. In 1991, Janet quietly married Rene Alzando Jr., a dancer and songwriter she had worked with since the mid-1980s. They told no one. Not the media, not the label, not even most of her family. For 9 years, they lived as husband and wife in private while acting like just co-workers in public. For Janet, hiding it felt safe. After a childhood controlled by Joe and a short, painful music marriage to James DeBarge, she wanted something on her own terms. Rene understood her life. He worked beside her. He saw her as Janet, not just a Jackson. That privacy felt like freedom. But secrets can also isolate you. While other stars showed off their love in public, Janet kept hers hidden. She later said, "I wanted to protect it. I thought if I kept it private, it couldn't be destroyed." By 1997, things were breaking. Janet released The Velvet Rope, her darkest and most emotional album. It talked about depression, loneliness, abuse, and bisexuality. The first track had her voice raw and real. "I feel so all alone." This wasn't the strong Janet from Control or Rhythm Nation. This was a woman fighting pain she never showed before. Songs, music, like Together Again, for friends lost to AIDS, carried deep sadness. I Get Lonely revealed emptiness. What About questioned her worth. Janet later admitted she had struggled with depression for years. Fame couldn't fix it. "I would cry for no reason," she said. "I felt lost even when I was winning." The album succeeded, selling 8 million worldwide. But inside, Janet was falling apart. Her marriage to Rene, once her safe place, was failing. The same privacy that protected them now trapped them. They barely appeared together. Janet focused on work. Rene pulled away. In 2000, it ended. Rene filed for divorce, and the secret was exposed. It got messy. He asked for huge money, saying he helped write songs and direct projects, which Janet's team denied. The legal fight was brutal, expensive, music, and humiliating. Janet was crushed. For the second time, her marriage failed. And this time, the world watched. Tabloids broke down every detail. The woman known for control was now seen as vulnerable, fooled, heartbroken. She later admitted, "That divorce broke me. I gave him everything, my trust, my heart, my privacy, and it still wasn't enough." After the divorce, Janet tried to heal, throwing herself into work and getting into a new relationship with music producer Jermaine Dri. The vibe between them was intense, super passionate, but also messy and chaotic, lasting on and off for almost a decade. Friends close to Janet started noticing a pattern. She was all about control in her career, bossing every move, but when it came to love, she just let go. With men, she became softer, more chill, more willing to overlook red flags if it meant she wouldn't be alone. "I just wanted to be loved," she admitted years later, "and I kept choosing men who couldn't give me what I needed." By the early 2000s, Janet was still that superstar. Her albums still sold, her tours still packed arenas. But behind the scenes, music, she was drained, like seriously exhausted. The non-stop grind of performing, recording, touring, music, and heartbreak had worn her down. She was getting close to 40, single, searching, and way more vulnerable than the public ever realized. And in that fragile state, she made a decision that would change her life forever. She agreed to perform at the Super Bowl 38 halftime show in February 2004. It was supposed to be a huge, iconic moment, a global stage, a celebration of everything she had built. Instead, it turned into the most catastrophic 9.16 seconds of her career. A moment that would wipe out decades of work, silence her voice, and prove that the control she fought so hard to claim could be snatched away in a blink. Not by her father, not by a failed marriage, but by an industry that had been low-key waiting for the perfect excuse to tear her down. February 1st, 2004. Reliance Stadium, Houston, Texas. Super Bowl 38. Over 143 million viewers worldwide. The halftime show, the most watched musical event on the planet. And Janet Jackson, at 37 years old, was ready to remind everybody why she was that girl. The performance was electric. Janet owned that stage alongside P. Diddy, Nelly, Kid Rock, Music, and Justin Timberlake, her former protege who had blown up into a solo star. The energy was crazy high, the production flawless. Janet moved with the precision that had always defined her career, sliding through medleys with pure confidence. Then came the finale. Janet and Justin performing Rock Your Body, his hit single. The choreography had been rehearsed again and again, like dozens of times. At the song's climax, Justin was supposed to pull away a piece of Janet's costume, a reveal showing a red lace bra underneath, edgy but still controlled. But something went totally wrong. At exactly 9.16 seconds before the end of the performance, Justin pulled the costume piece. Instead of revealing the bra, he ripped away the entire bodice. Janet's right breast was exposed on live television, bare, visible to 143 million people. The moment lasted less than a second. CBS instantly cut to an aerial shot of the stadium, but the damage was already done, and it was irreversible. Backstage, everything went wild. Producers, music, were yelling into headsets. NFL executives stared at monitors in shock. MTV, which had produced the halftime show, went straight into panic mode. And Janet, still trying to catch her breath, didn't even know what had happened until someone told her. "What? What do you mean?" she asked. Music, totally confused. They showed her the footage. Her face turned pale. Justin, standing nearby, looked stunned. "I didn't mean," he started, but the words just faded away. Within minutes, his team was already putting together, music, a statement. By the time Janet got back to her dressing room, the storm had already exploded. News outlets were replaying the footage in slow motion nonstop. Websites crashed because of the traffic. The phrase wardrobe malfunction was literally born in real time, created by Justin's publicist, a clinical-sounding term for something millions saw as scandalous. Within hours, Justin released, music, a statement. "I am sorry that anyone was offended by the wardrobe malfunction during the halftime performance. It was not intentional and is regrettable." He called it a malfunction. He made himself sound passive, like the costume just magically tore on its own. He apologized for offense, not for what he did. And then, just like that, he disappeared from the drama. Janet, meanwhile, was left standing alone in the middle of a national moral meltdown. The Federal Communications Commission received over 500,000 complaints, the most in the agency's history. CBS was fined $550,000. The NFL promised never to let MTV produce the halftime show again. Parents' groups demanded Janet's arrest. Conservative commentators blasted her as a symbol of America's moral decay. Tabloids ran headlines like, "Shame on you, Janet." Within 48 hours, Janet was called in to apologize. Not Justin, Janet. She released a statement, then appeared in a video, her voice shaking. The decision to have a costume reveal at the end of my halftime show was made after final rehearsals. MTV, CBS, and the NFL had no knowledge of this whatsoever. I take full responsibility. She took full responsibility for a decision Justin was part of, for a reveal he carried out, for an outcome nobody intended. And still, it wasn't enough. The Recording Academy disinvited her from the Grammys, where she was supposed to present an award and introduce a Luther Vandross tribute. Justin Timberlake, however, was allowed to perform and even won 2 Grammys that same night. He faced zero music consequences, no disinvitation, no boycott. Radio stations across the country stopped playing Janet's music. Clear Channel, the biggest radio company in the nation, sent an internal memo blacklisting her. Overnight, Janet Jackson, one of the best-selling artists ever, basically disappeared from American airwaves. Her next album, Damita Jo, released just months later in March 2004, was dead on arrival. Even with strong reviews, it sold only a fraction of what her previous albums had. Radio wouldn't touch it. MTV refused to show the videos. Janet was being erased in real time. Justin, meanwhile, kept rising. He went on Saturday Night Live and joked about the incident, literally laughing about it on national television. His album Justified kept selling. His career kept climbing. He was even invited back to perform at the Super Bowl in 2018. Janet was never invited again. The double standard was obvious and honestly disgusting. Justin Timberlake, a white man, walked away untouched. Janet Jackson, a black woman, was torn down. The racial and gender dynamics were impossible to ignore. America had no issue sexualizing Janet when it benefited them. Her albums, videos, and image had been marketed around sensuality for years. But the moment her body was exposed without corporate control, suddenly she was labeled obscene and dangerous. Critics called out the hypocrisy. Feminist writers described it as misogynoir, the specific mix of racism and sexism faced by black women. But mainstream America didn't care. They wanted a villain, and they picked Janet. She later said, "I was crucified and he was forgiven." And that was the truth. Behind closed doors, Janet was completely broken. Friends said she was devastated, humiliated, and betrayed. She had trusted the industry, trusted her collaborators, trusted that decades of professionalism would matter. They didn't. The Super Bowl didn't just hurt her career. It shattered something inside her. The control she fought so hard to gain was stripped away in 9.16 seconds, and this time she couldn't fight back. The forces against her, corporate media, the Federal Communications Commission, public morality, systemic racism, and sexism, were just too powerful. She was alone again. The girl who grew up invisible, controlled, and silenced had become the woman punished for being seen. February 1st, 2004 was meant to be a celebration. Instead, it felt like an execution. And Janet Jackson, one of the most influential artists of her generation, would spend the next decade trying to recover from a fall that was never really hers. In the months after the Super Bowl, Janet tried to move on. She had apologized. She had taken responsibility. She had endured the public humiliation. She probably thought the storm would eventually fade. But it didn't. Damita Jo, released in March 2004, was an album Janet poured her soul into. Sensual, grown, confident. Critics respected it. Fans who could actually find it loved it. But radio straight up refused to play it. MTV wouldn't even air the videos. Retailers barely put it on the shelves. The album debuted at number 2 on the Billboard 200, which for most artists would be solid, but for Janet Jackson, who had been running the charts for 2 decades, it was a total disaster. Damita Jo sold just over 1 million copies in the US. Music, just a tiny slice of what her earlier albums had done. For context, All For You had sold over 3 million only 3 years before. The message was loud and clear. America was done with Janet Jackson. Virgin Records, her label, music, started backing away. Marketing budgets got cut. Promotion just vanished. Industry insiders were low-key, saying the label had already given up before the album even dropped. They didn't fight for her. One former executive even admitted they were embarrassed to be connected to her. Janet felt that rejection deep in her soul. Conference calls turned awkward and tense. Executives who once hyped her genius were now questioning her moves. The same sensual vibe they had pushed for years was suddenly too much. The same bold energy they once praised was now risky. By 2005, Janet pulled back. She barely did interviews. She stayed away from music, public appearances. Friends said she was depressed, anxious, trying to figure out how 20 years of greatness could get wiped out by 9 seconds. "I didn't want to leave my house," she later confessed. "I felt like everywhere I went, people were judging me." In 2006, Janet tried to bounce back with 20 Years Old, an album marking 20 years since Control. The title meant something, like going back to the strength and independence that defined her. She worked with Jermaine Dri, her boyfriend at the time, hoping their vibe would spark her career again. The album had some fire moments. Call on Me was a strong single. So Excited featuring Kia brought energy, but once again, radio shut her out. The album debuted at number 2, then dropped fast. It sold under 500,000 copies in the US. Janet's worst commercial performance ever. The industry had made up its mind. Janet Jackson was persona non grata. Award shows stopped inviting her. Fashion brands pulled endorsements. Tour promoters offered smaller venues with lower pay. Collaborators who once begged to work with her suddenly acted busy. Even younger artists, singers, music, who grew up worshiping Janet kept quiet, scared that being linked to her might mess up their own careers. Janet later said this was the loneliest time of her life. "I had spent my whole career being there for other people," she said. "When I needed support, almost everyone disappeared." The mental toll hit hard. Janet, who had already battled depression even at her peak, spiraled deeper. She gained weight, and the media mocked her nonstop. Paparazzi snapped unflattering photos. Tabloids ran savage headlines about her body. The same woman once praised for her sensuality was now dragged for her looks. She stopped performing for almost 2 years. When she finally returned to the stage at smaller festivals, the vibe had changed. The spark wasn't the same. She looked exhausted, defeated. Behind closed doors, Janet faced a brutal reality. The same industry that built her could destroy her, and it had chosen destruction. She watched Justin Timberlake's career take off. He headlined festivals. He won awards. He was invited to perform at the Super Bowl halftime show in 2018, 14 years after the incident. The injustice hit different. In interviews, Janet kept getting asked about the Super Bowl. She got music tired of it. "Can we talk about my music?" she would beg. But reporters didn't care about her music. They wanted drama. By 2008, her relationship with Jermaine Dri ended. Another breakup, another source of stability gone. Janet found herself single, pushed to the sidelines professionally, and emotionally drained. She started accepting a painful truth. There would be no easy comeback, no redemption handed to her. If she wanted her voice back, she had to grind for it herself. Slowly, quietly, without the system that once supported her. But even in the darkness, Janet refused to disappear. She kept writing. She kept recording. She performed in smaller venues for fans who still rode for her. She held on to hope that one day the world would remember who she was before those 9 seconds changed everything. The blacklist killed her commercially, but it couldn't erase her legacy. Deep down, under all the pain and exhaustion, Janet Jackson still had one truth nobody could take away. She survived. Worse, she escaped Joe. She built Control from nothing. She reshaped pop music. If she did it once, maybe, just maybe, she could do it again. But first, she would face a loss that made industry rejection feel small. A grief so heavy it changed everything. The death of her brother, Michael. Janet and Michael were connected by more than blood. They were the youngest in Joe Jackson's empire, the baby sister and the golden child. They understood things nobody else did. The rehearsals that lasted until sunrise. The belt waiting for mistakes. A childhood stolen before it even started. But their bond was complicated. Janet loved Michael deeply, but she also lived in his shadow. Every win she had was compared to his. Every album measured, every performance judged against his genius. Michael knew this. He called her after control dropped, his voice soft and proud. "You did it, Dunk," using his childhood nickname for her. "You're free." It was one of the rare times Janet cried happy tears. But by the mid-2000s, Michael was falling apart. The 2005 child molestation trial almost destroyed him. Even though he was cleared, the damage stuck. His reputation broke. His money problems grew. His health got worse. Janet watched from a distance, heartbroken and powerless. She called him often, but Michael pulled away. He moved across countries, surrounded himself with handlers, and became paranoid. The brother she knew, quiet, gentle, and brilliant, was fading behind trauma and prescription drugs. She wanted to step in, but the Jackson family drama made it impossible. Joe still controlled things from the shadows. Her brothers were desperate for money. Catherine had no real power, and Michael trusted nobody. Then came June 25, 2009. Janet was in New York when her assistant rushed in, looking shaken. "It's Michael," she said. "You need to call home now." The news was messy and confusing. Michael was in the hospital. CPR was done. No one knew what was happening. Janet called family nonstop, but nobody had answers. Then hours later, the truth hit. Michael Jackson was dead at 50. Cardiac arrest, drug overdose. Janet collapsed. The world mourned loudly. Millions gathered. Candlelight vigils. Tributes everywhere. News took over every channel. But Janet's grief was private, suffocating, full of guilt. "I should have done more. I should have forced my way in. I should have saved him." Within days, the Jackson family got pulled into chaos. Fights over the estate started immediately. Joe tried to take control. Siblings argued about money. Lawyers circled like vultures. Michael's death wasn't just tragedy. It became business. Janet pulled away. She rejected most interviews. She avoided cameras outside the family home. She was mourning the boy who once danced with her in the living room, who whispered encouragement when Joe's belt hit. The only Jackson who truly understood being broken and rebuilt by the same system. On July 7, 2009, Janet stood in front of 20,000 people at the Staples Center for Michael's memorial. Cameras caught every tear. The world watched her pain, analyzed everything. She was asked to speak. She couldn't do it. Instead, she stood quietly beside her family, wearing sunglasses to hide swollen eyes from weeks of crying. When the family gave a short, emotional tribute, Janet stood with her brothers and sisters, holding on to them because there was nothing else left. Michael's death left a massive hole. He was the Jackson legacy, the king of pop, the reason the world knew their name. Now that weight fell on the siblings, especially Janet, the only other Jackson with solo superstardom. People expected her to carry the torch, to honor him, to be the Jackson the world still believed in. But Janet was already shattered, blacklisted, exhausted, and now grieving the one person who truly understood her journey. Years later, she admitted in interviews, "Losing Michael, I still haven't fully processed it. He was my brother, but he was also the only one who truly knew what our childhood did to us." Michael's death didn't just take her brother. It took the last witness to her pain, the last person who could confirm the wounds nobody else believed were real. And in that deep, heavy loneliness, Janet Jackson faced a question she had spent her whole life dodging. Who am I when there's no one left who remembers where I came from? After Michael's death and years of being pushed out professionally, Janet basically stepped away from the spotlight almost completely. She traveled. She rested. She tried to heal the scars that had been stacking up for decades. And in 2010, during a quiet moment in Dubai, she met Wis Al Manna, a Qatari billionaire businessman, reserved and private. Their relationship moved slow, low-key, and discreet. Wis was nothing like the musicians and entertainers Janet had dated before. He was calm, cultured, and deeply religious. He gave her something she hadn't felt in years, peace and stillness. In 2012, they got married in secret. Once again, Janet chose privacy over publicity, hoping silence might protect what was fragile. For a while, it actually worked. In 2015, Janet came back to music with Unbreakable, her first album in 7 years. The title was bold, like she was saying straight up that she had survived everything thrown her way. Critics praised it as mature and introspective. It debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200, proving her fans had never left her side, even when the industry did. The Unbreakable World Tour launched to sold-out arenas. Janet, now in her late 40s, danced with the energy of someone half her age. She looked happy, lighter, like a weight had been lifted. The blacklist hadn't broken her. She was still standing. Then in April 2016, Janet shocked everyone. She postponed the tour. Weeks later, the reason came out and left the world stunned. She was pregnant at 49 years old. For a woman who had spent decades defined by career, performance, and control, motherhood was completely new territory. Pregnancy at 49 carried serious risks. Doctors warned her to be careful. But Janet felt this was her moment, maybe her last shot. On January 3, 2017, Isa Almana was born. Janet held her son for the first time and felt something she had been searching for her whole life. Real, unconditional love with no performance required. "He doesn't care about my albums," she said, crying. "He doesn't care about my mistakes. He just wants me." Motherhood changed Janet in ways fame never could. She stopped obsessing over charts. She stopped reading reviews. She stopped tying her worth to industry validation. Her world got smaller, but in the best way, focused on one tiny, precious human who needed her. But even in this happiness, darkness didn't fully disappear. By April 2017, just 3 months after Isa's birth, Janet filed for divorce from Wiss. The breakup was quick and painful. Reports said Wiss had become controlling, telling Janet what to wear, where to go, and how to raise Isa. Friends claimed he wanted her to quit everything and live in isolation. Janet had escaped Joe's control. She had escaped the industry's control. She wasn't about to give in to another man, no way. The divorce got messy, with custody fights and money disputes. But Janet stayed strong. She took Isa and walked away. "My son comes first," she told her lawyers. "Everything else is negotiable." He is not. For the first time ever, Janet chose herself and her child over a man's approval. Motherhood forced her to see the patterns she had carried for years. She had always chased love from people who couldn't give it. Joe withheld affection. Renee wanted her money. Wiss wanted control. But Isa loved her with no conditions, no deals, no performance. "He saved me," Janet said in a rare interview. "I didn't even know I needed saving, but I did." She started therapy. She unpacked trauma buried for 50 years. She spoke openly about Joe's abuse for the first time. She talked about the Super Bowl without shame, calling out the injustice clearly. She stopped apologizing just for existing. By 2018, Janet was performing again, but on her own terms. She brought Isa on tour, planning everything around his naps and bedtime. She turned down opportunities that meant long separations. She made decisions not based on fame or charts, but on being present. The girl who had grown up invisible, the woman who fought for control, the superstar who hit the peak, the exile who was pushed aside, finally found peace in her 50s. Not through another hit, not through industry approval, but through the quiet, steady love of a little boy calling her mama. For years, the world seemed okay with forgetting Janet Jackson. Radio ignored her. Award shows overlooked her. Younger generations knew the name, but not the impact. The story had been set, talented but controversial, successful but scandalous. Then slowly, culture began to shift. In 2017, the Me Too movement exploded, forcing society to face how women were treated, especially those punished for men's actions. People looked back at February 2004 with fresh eyes. They rewatched the footage. They saw Justin Timberlake pull Janet's costume. They saw him walk away untouched while her career got wrecked. And finally, people asked the real question. Janet had been suffering in silence for 13 years. Why did she pay alone? Articles appeared. Documentaries explored the racial and gender bias. Critics called it what it was, misogynoir, the mix of racism and sexism that punishes black women for the same sexuality it profits from. In 2019, Janet was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Standing on that stage at 52, she gave a speech full of strength and reflection. "I've learned forgiveness is hard," she said, "but holding on to anger is harder." She didn't name anyone. She didn't have to. Everyone already knew. Then in February 2021, after the Framing Britney Spears documentary sparked new conversations about how the industry exploited young women, Justin Timberlake finally apologized publicly. "I am deeply sorry," he wrote, naming both Britney Spears and Janet Jackson. It took 17 years. Janet never responded. Friends say she saw it and moved on. She didn't need his words. She had already set herself free. By 2022, Janet was ready to share her story her way. The documentary Janet gave her full creative control. She spoke openly about Joe, depression, the Super Bowl, and the pain of being erased. It didn't erase the hurt, but it took back the narrative. She was no longer the victim. She was the storyteller. Her influence had never faded anyway. Beyoncé credited Rhythm Nation as inspiration. Ciara built her career on Janet's blueprint. Tinashe, Normani, and many more openly called her the standard for a black female pop star. But Janet had moved past needing validation. She lives quietly now, splitting time between London and Los Angeles, raising Isa away from chaos. She performs sometimes, but only when it doesn't disturb her son's life. She posts rarely. She speaks even less. The need to be seen no longer controls her. "I don't need the world's permission anymore," she said in 2023. "I spent 50 years chasing approval. Now I just need my son's laughter and my own peace." Her legacy isn't just numbers or awards. It's the generations of women she empowered to own their bodies, voices, and choices. She taught artists that sexuality isn't weakness and control isn't given, it's taken. Janet Jackson's story isn't a fairy tale. It's real. A girl taught to obey who learned to lead. A woman silenced who refused to stay quiet. An icon punished for being powerful, black, and unapologetic, who survived and kept living on her own terms. She didn't get a perfect redemption story. She got freedom. Not because the industry forgave her, but because she forgave herself. Because she chose her son over fame. Because she realized the only control that truly matters is the control over your own story. And in the end, Janet Jackson, daughter, sister, survivor of betrayal, blacklisting, and loss, wrote her own ending. She became the woman she needed when she was a little girl. And that, more than any award or chart, is the legacy that will last forever.